The click of the remote control sounded like a gunshot in the silence of my own living room. The screen went black. The sound disappeared. And in that second, I understood something that had taken me years to accept. They didn't want me there anymore. "Go to your room, old woman. You don't have permission to be here anymore." My son lowered his head. He said nothing, and I knew that silence was going to cost us dearly. "My name is Elaine Margaret Pembroke. I am 68 years old. I have been a widow for 12 years, and I am retired after 35 years as an administrative clerk at City Hall. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. This house, the one with the beige walls and the white picket fence at 847 Maple Street, is in my name, not by inheritance, by work, by decades of waking up before dawn, counting every dollar, saving every receipt, paying property taxes on time even when life was crashing down on me. That afternoon, November 14th, 2024, I was sitting in my floral armchair, the one I bought for $847 from Harrison's Furniture on Oak Avenue after my husband Harold died. I couldn't stand using the furniture he had chosen anymore. Every curve, every fabric pattern reminded me of his absence. The local news was on the television. Channel 7. Nothing important, just that gentle murmur that keeps an older woman company when she can finally sit down without anyone asking her for anything. After the news, Wheel of Fortune would come on at 7, and I always tried to solve the puzzles before the contestants did. Small pleasures, the kind you earn after 68 years of living. The smell of fresh coffee and pastries floated from the kitchen. I had bought them that morning from Sullivan's Bakery, $23, $50 for a box of assorted Danish pastries and croissants, just in case they craved something sweet when they got home. Always thinking of them, always anticipating someone else's desires, as if my value only existed when I was useful to somebody. My knees hurt less that day. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes the body grants small truces, moments in which one can simply exist, not be a nuisance, not be a burden, just be. Then the front door opened with force. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Laura. My daughter-in-law always enters as if the house were a place that needs to be conquered. Firm heels, those designer shoes with the red soles, $895, charged to the credit card I pay for. Expensive perfume that fills a room before she does. Steps that don't ask for permission. Behind her was my son, Vincent, 42 years old, software engineer working from home. He had tired eyes and slumped shoulders, as if he came apologizing in advance for whatever was about to happen. I didn't move. I kept watching the screen. It was my house, my armchair, my moment. Laura stopped in front of the television, blocking my view. I felt her shadow before seeing her. That gesture of hers, improvised authority learned I don't know where, but always exercised with me. "I'm tired," she said. Her voice was flat, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. "Vincent had a horrible day. We want to watch our show." She didn't ask. She didn't wait for an answer. She took the remote from the little side table, the one I bought at an estate sale in 1987 for $45, and pressed the red button. Click. The room went mute. The screen went black. "Go to your room, old woman," she repeated, this time louder. "You don't have permission to be here anymore." The words didn't hurt as they should have. What hurt was looking at Vincent. I waited a second. 2, 3. I waited for him to say, "Don't talk to my mother like that." I waited for him to remember who paid for this house, who paid the property taxes, $4,287 annually, who paid the electricity bill, averaging $178 a month, who paid the internet, $89.99 a month, so Laura could stream her reality shows and Vincent could work from his home office. I waited for him to remember who let them stay for just a few months when they got married 4 years ago. October 15th, 2020. I remember the date because I made pot roast that night to welcome them. But my son lowered his head. He looked at the floor, and with that small gesture, he pushed me further away than any scream ever could. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't rage, it wasn't shame. It was clarity, like someone had wiped fog from a window I'd been staring through for years. I got up from the armchair slowly. My knees cracked with a dry sound that no one heard because their attention was on Laura, who was already letting herself fall onto the sofa like a tired queen claiming her throne. I said nothing. Words I understood in that instant were no longer useful. I walked toward the hallway. Each step felt deliberate, measured, like I was counting them. Laura smiled, satisfied. To her, I was obeying. To her, I was an old piece of furniture that gets put away when it's in the way. I went into my room and closed the door. Not to cry, I opened the bottom drawer of the nightstand, the same nightstand Harold and I bought at Sears in 1978 for $125, and took out my black leather bag, the one I use only for important business. Inside was the heavy keychain with 7 keys, and a blue folder with worn rubber bands holding it together. I opened it. Everything was there. Property deed, dated March 3rd, 1987. Purchase price, $87,500. Paid in full by April 1997. Property tax receipts going back 37 years. Not a single late payment. Payment stubs from City Hall, documenting every paycheck from 1972 to 2007. My full and clear name on every document. Elaine Margaret Pembroke. I took a deep breath and looked at myself in the mirror above the dresser. I saw a woman with short gray hair, neatly combed, glasses hanging from a delicate silver chain, a simple cream-colored blouse, comfortable tan pants. No one would say she was dangerous. She looked like the typical grandmother who babysits grandkids and makes chicken soup on Sundays. The kind of woman people overlook. The kind they assume has nothing, knows nothing, is nothing. That was my advantage. I picked up the blue folder. I picked up my black bag. I put on my comfortable walking shoes, SAS brand, $165 from Miller's shoe store, and went back to the living room. Laura had already turned on the television, some reality show about wealthy women arguing at dinner parties. The volume was high, obnoxiously high. Vincent was sitting next to her, rigid, his eyes fixed on the screen but not really watching. He didn't look at me. I passed in front of them, heading to the front door. My shoes echoed on the hardwood floor I'd had refinished in 2003 for $3,400. Laura turned her head. "Where are you going now?" she asked mockingly. Her voice dripped with the kind of contempt reserved for people you consider beneath you. "To complain to someone?" I didn't answer. I opened the door. I felt the fresh November air on my face. It was 4:47 p.m. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Before leaving, I looked one last time at the living room, at the armchair, at the coffee table I'd had for 40 years, at the walls I had painted myself, 3 coats of Benjamin Moore Navajo white, $48 per gallon, when Harold's hands became too shaky to hold a brush. Everything was still mine, even if at that moment it didn't feel like it. I stepped outside. I closed the door carefully, and I turned the key from the outside, locking it with a soft click, a different kind of click from the one that had started all this. I walked to the corner of Maple and Oak, where I knew taxis passed regularly. My left knee started throbbing by the second block, but I kept going. Pain is something you learn to walk with at my age. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew something with absolute certainty. I was not going to return that night. And the next morning, someone would knock on that door. The taxi smelled of hot vinyl and artificial pine, one of those tree-shaped air fresheners that promises a forest, even though you're trapped in suburban traffic. I sat in the back with the black bag hugged against my chest, feeling the weight of the keychain like a physical reminder of who I was, of who I had always been, even when I let myself forget. "Where to, ma'am?" asked the driver. He was a man in his early 50s with a thin gray mustache and tired eyes. His ID on the dashboard said Robert Patterson. It took me a second to answer, not because I didn't know where to go, but because for the first time in years, I allowed myself to choose something for me, without asking permission, without considering whether it would inconvenience anyone else. "The Grand Central Hotel," I said finally. My voice came out firmer than I expected. "Downtown." Robert looked at me through the rearview mirror, his eyebrows raised slightly. "The Grand Central? That's a nice one. They treat people like people there." I nodded, although inside I thought, like people. What a sad thing that one has to pay to be treated with respect. As the taxi moved forward, the lights of the street stretched on the window like yellow and red ribbons. The world remained the same. Vendors closing up shop, car horns in the distance, people walking fast, heads down, looking at their phones. And yet, I felt like I had just left a room where I had been locked up for years without realizing it. I remembered the click of the remote, the black screen, Laura's voice saying "old woman" as if I were trash to be swept away. But what burned me the most wasn't her. It was Vincent, my son, looking at the floor. At what moment did I raise him to bow his head? When did he learn that silence was a way to survive? And then I thought something worse, something that fell on me like a bucket of ice water in November. Maybe he learned it watching me, because I also stayed silent many times. For peace, to not cause drama, to not bother anyone, for fear of being alone. I had spent 4 years, 1,461 days, watching Laura take over my home inch by inch. First it was, just until we get back on our feet. Then it was, the market is tough right now. Then it was, why would we waste money on rent when there's space here? And I said nothing. When she rearranged my kitchen cabinets without asking, nothing. When she threw away my collection of ceramic birds that Harold had given me over 20 years of anniversaries, nothing. When she started answering my phone and screening my calls, nothing. When she told my friends from church, Dorothy Hayes, Maggie Sullivan, the women I'd known for 30 years, that I was too tired for visitors, nothing, 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 until today. Today, the nothing became something. The taxi stopped in front of the Grand Central Hotel at 5:23 p.m. The building had a stone facade and a discreet brass sign. Old money elegance, the kind of place where people spoke in low voices and problems were solved with paperwork, not shouting. A young bellman in a burgundy uniform opened my door. "Good evening, ma'am," he greeted with a practiced smile. His name tag said Timothy. He couldn't have been older than 25. "Can I help you with your luggage?" I looked at my black bag. "I only brought this," I said, "and a bunch of things in here." I pointed to my head. Timothy smiled without fully understanding, but with that kindness that doesn't ask, only offers. He accompanied me to the reception desk. The lobby smelled of fresh flowers and furniture polish. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. A grand piano sat in the corner, though no one was playing it. No one looked at me like a nuisance. No one ordered me to go to my room as punishment. "Checking in?" asked the receptionist. She was a woman in her 40s with auburn hair pulled back in an elegant bun. Her name tag read Patricia Morrison. "Yes, I need a room, just for myself." "Of course, how many nights?" "Let's start with 3. I may extend." "Certainly. May I have a name for the reservation?" "Elaine Pembroke." Saying my full name out loud felt like signing a document, like existing again. The room cost $189 per night, plus tax, $623.43 for 3 nights. I paid with my own credit card, the one Laura didn't know about, the one linked to my personal savings account at First National Bank, where I had $47,832.16 as of my last statement. I took the elevator to the 6th floor. The hallway was carpeted in deep burgundy, and that alone was a luxury for my knees. No hard floors to jar my joints with every step. When I opened the door to room 614, I was greeted by a smell of lavender and freshly changed sheets. The room was simple but elegant. A queen-sized bed with a white duvet, a writing desk by the window, a small sitting area with a wing-back chair, and there, on the wall opposite the bed, was something that made me swallow hard. A large television, and the remote control sitting on the nightstand. I picked it up. It weighed almost nothing, cheap plastic with rubber buttons, but in my head, it had the weight of a war. I pressed the power button. The screen glowed to life. I turned up the volume, changed to channel 7, the local news, the same one Laura had turned off. The anchor was talking about road construction on the interstate. Nothing important. But the sound of it filled the room like company, and right then, that was enough. No one came in to turn it off. No one told me I didn't have permission. I sat on the edge of the bed and let out the air I felt like I'd been holding for 4 years. I didn't cry. Not yet. First came something else. A cold calm. The kind that settles over you when a decision has already been made and all that's left is the doing. I opened my black bag and took out the blue folder. I reviewed the pages slowly. the way I used to review files at City Hall. Each document a checkpoint. Each checkpoint confirmed. Deed to 847 Maple Street. Elaine Margaret Pembroke, sole owner. Property tax receipts, 1987 through 2024. 37 years. Never a late payment. Utility bills in my name. Every single one. My name, my house. Everything in order. Everything legal. Everything clear. And yet they had made me feel like a guest in my own home. I closed the folder and took out my phone. An iPhone SE. Nothing fancy, but it worked. I'd bought it for $429 last year when my old flip phone finally gave up. My fingers trembled a little. Not from fear, from adrenaline. It's a strange feeling at 68. Your body remembers what it's like to fight, even when you haven't done it in decades. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I almost never called. A name that had been sitting there for years, like a fire extinguisher behind glass. Break in case of emergency. Daniel Whitmore, attorney at law. Daniel had been a legal advisor at City Hall when I still worked there. We weren't coffee friends. We didn't exchange Christmas cards. But he was one of those men who respected you because they knew how you worked. And he knew me. He knew I was the woman who returned a file because of a badly placed signature. The woman who spotted a $12,000 accounting error that saved the city from a lawsuit. The woman who let nothing pass on good faith. The Elaine who didn't let herself be pushed around. I dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? A deep voice, slightly rough. He'd been sleeping. It was almost 9 p.m. now. Attorney Whitmore, it's Elaine Pembroke. There was a short silence. Then the tone changed completely. Elaine, are you okay? It's late. I'm awake, I said, looking at my reflection in the dark border of the TV screen. My eyes looked sharper than they had in years. And I need your help. Tomorrow morning. What happened? I stayed silent for a second. Not because of doubt, but because it hurt to say it out loud. As if naming it made it real. As if speaking the words turned a feeling into a fact. They kicked me out of my own living room, I finally said. My daughter-in-law turned off the television, called me old woman, told me to go to my room, said I didn't have permission to be there anymore. I heard him shift, a chair creaking. He was sitting up. And your son? Stayed silent. Another pause, longer this time. Elaine, Daniel said slowly, that's abuse. That's psychological abuse. And if you're the owner of the property, I am the owner, I interrupted, my voice dry as autumn leaves. It's in my name. I pay the property tax. They've lived there temporarily for 4 years without a contract, without rent, using my electricity, my water, and my patience. I understand, he said, now fully awake. Where are you now? In a hotel. I'm not going back tonight. Good. And that single word, good, tasted like support, like someone was finally standing beside me instead of looking through me. Tomorrow, first thing, Daniel continued, we can prepare an eviction notice, a formal warning. We give them 30 days. Put 30 because that's what the law requires, I said. But I want them to feel it tomorrow morning. I want someone to go early to deliver the document. Let them see it. Let them understand what they've done. Elaine, he started cautiously, normally it's best to keep things civil. Civil, I interrupted with a sharp calm that surprised even me, was me for 4 years. Civil was when I ate the stale bread so they could have the fresh loaf. Civil was when I paid $89.99 a month for internet so she could binge her shows and he could work from home. Civil was when I stayed silent so they wouldn't get angry. I took a deep breath. I don't want to be civil anymore, Daniel. I want to be fair. On the other end, Daniel kept silent for a moment. Then he said something that made me feel, for the first time in years, like I wasn't alone. Tomorrow at 8 a.m., my office. 445 Commerce Street, Suite 302. You sign the papers and I'll send my assistant Richard Callahan. Young man always in a suit. Serious face. Hand delivery with signed receipt. No screaming, but presence. I closed my eyes. I imagined the doorbell ringing at 847 Maple Street. Laura opening the door, expecting the delivery man or a neighbor, and meeting the law instead. Perfect, I whispered. That's exactly what I want. Anything else? I looked at my bag, the keys, the folder, my name. Yes, I answered, and my voice came out firmer than it had in years. I want it to be clear that the house is mine, that there is no permission anymore, that the favor is over, and that starting tomorrow, I decide the volume, I decide the space, I decide who enters and who leaves. So it will be, Daniel said without hesitation. Get some rest, Elaine. You've got a big day tomorrow. I hung up. I stayed for a while looking at the television, turned on but not really watching it. The room was still. Outside, the city kept breathing, cars passing, distant sirens, the low hum of a world that doesn't stop for anyone's heartbreak. And I, for the first time in a long time, felt something resembling relief. It wasn't joy, not yet. It was freedom, the first taste of it, and it was bittersweet. I went to bed with the remote control on the pillow next to me, like a lucky charm, like a security blanket against everything I had allowed to happen to me. Before closing my eyes, I thought about my living room, my armchair, Vincent's silence, Laura's satisfied smile. Tomorrow they were going to hear a different sound. Not the click of a remote control, but the dry knock of reality hitting the door. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, pale morning light was pressing against the hotel curtains and my phone was buzzing on the nightstand. Not a call, a message. 8:12 a.m. Richard is on his way. DW. I read those 4 words sitting on the edge of the bed, my bare feet on the cold carpet. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel rushed. I got up slowly. My knees always take a minute to cooperate in the morning, and poured myself a coffee from the small Keurig machine on the desk. Complimentary pods, nothing fancy but hot and strong. I sat in the wingback chair by the window. From the 6th floor, I could see the city waking up. Delivery trucks, street vendors setting up, people walking fast, coffee cups in hand, earbuds in, worlds of their own. I thought about my house. At this same hour, Laura would surely still be in her pajamas, scrolling through her phone. Vincent would be preparing coffee with a long face, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Grace, my granddaughter, 14 years old, would be fixing her backpack for school, not understanding why the atmosphere had been so heavy since the night before. They knew nothing yet, but they were about to know everything. At 8:29 a.m., my phone vibrated again. Richard is ringing the doorbell. I closed my eyes for a second, not to pray, to savor the moment. 4 years of silence, of swallowing words, of giving up space, of making myself smaller and smaller so others could feel bigger. All of it condensed into that simple gesture, someone well-dressed, standing in front of my door, with an envelope in his hand. I imagined the scene with a clarity that gave me goosebumps. Laura hearing the doorbell, thinking it was the gas company, or Amazon, or a neighbor. She always opens doors in a rush as if the world owes her something. "Who is it?" she would ask, not unlocking the chain. "Good morning. I'm looking for the occupants of this residence." Richard would say it with a firm, professional voice. No emotion, just facts. Laura would open the door wider. She'd see him. Dark suit, leather portfolio, straight posture, and frown. "What do you need?" "I have a legal notification for the occupants of this property. Mrs. Laura Pembroke?" And right there, arrogance turns into unease. My phone vibrated again, this time an incoming call. Vincent. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't answer. A second later, a text message. "Mom, where are you? There's a lawyer here with some papers. Laura is very upset." I read the message without rushing. I took a sip of coffee. The taste was bitter, but honest. "Read the document," I wrote back, "and lower your voice." Nothing else. At 8:41 a.m., the phone vibrated again. Now it was Laura. I didn't answer. Messages arrived one after another. Rapid fire, each one more desperate than the last. "This is ridiculous. How dare you do this? We are family. You're humiliating us." Family. That word. So big, so used, so mistreated. Family was what I was when I received them into my house with their suitcases and their promises. "Just a few months, Mom, just until we get on our feet." Family was paying everything while they figured things out. Family was buying groceries while Laura ordered $200 face creams online, and Vincent upgraded his computer setup. Family was silencing myself to not be uncomfortable, to not be difficult, To not be that kind of mother-in-law. I took a deep breath and blocked my phone for a while. I didn't want to read more. Not now. At 9:03 a.m., the phone rang again. Vincent. This time I answered. Mom, his voice was broken, cracking at the edges. Laura says this is illegal, that no one can kick us out like this, just like that. No one is kicking you out just like that, I answered with a calm voice. I'm giving you a deadline as the law requires, as the respect that yesterday you didn't give me requires. But, he hesitated. I could hear Laura shouting something in the background. Sharp, shrill. Why like this? Why with lawyers? I smiled, although he couldn't see me. Because when I spoke as a mother, you didn't listen to me. Now I speak as the owner. There was silence on the other side. She says that you've always hated us, Vincent said in a low voice. That you're looking for any excuse to run us off. That hurt, but it didn't break me. Vincent, I said, using his full name like when he was a child and had done something wrong. I didn't run you off yesterday. I left, because I was not going to stay somewhere I was told I didn't have permission to be. That was my decision. Today is the consequence. I hung up before he could answer. At 9:27 a.m., a message came from an unknown number. Attorney Daniel Whitmore's office. Document delivered. Receipt signed. Mrs. Pembroke initially refused, but copy was left on premises. All in order. Richard Callahan. I closed my eyes and let out the air, like when a door finally closes properly and the cold draft no longer seeps in. The phone vibrated again. A message from Laura. This isn't going to stay like this. You don't know who you messed with. I read those words, and for the first time since last night, I laughed. A low laugh, almost incredulous. No, I thought. The one who doesn't know who she messed with is you. At 10 a.m., when the noise of the hotel began to mix with the murmur of late breakfast downstairs, I made a decision I had been putting off for years without knowing it. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't vengeful. It was exact. Like closing a faucet that has dripped too long. I sat at the small desk in the room. I took out my hardcover notebook and wrote a short, clear list. No decorations, no hesitation. Internet, cable TV, additional credit card. That was all. I was not going to cut the electricity or the water. I didn't want to punish anyone with basic discomforts. That isn't who I am. But I was also not going to keep paying for the comfort of people who had thrown me out of my own living room. I dialed the number of the internet company. The hold music sounded as always, irritating if you're in a hurry, almost pleasant if you've already decided. Thank you for calling. How can I help you? A kind young voice. I'm the account holder, I answered. I want to suspend the service temporarily. Any particular reason, ma'am? I looked out the window. The sky was clear, blue and open. A good day for cleaning house. Home reorganization, I said. Internal changes. Understood. It will be suspended within a maximum of 2 hours. Perfect. I hung up and dialed the next number. Cable television. Same process. My data. My name. My decision. Ma'am, are you sure? The operator asked. You have a premium package with sports channels and... Very sure, I interrupted calmly. Suspend everything. Then I opened the banking app on my phone. There it was. Additional credit card. Laura Ann Pembroke. Vincent had insisted on getting it for her when they first moved in. It's easier this way, Mom, for groceries and household stuff. Easier for them, I thought. Not for me. I touched the screen with a firm finger. Block card. Confirm. Done. I set the phone on the desk and stared at the wall for a moment. I didn't feel guilt. I felt something cleaner. Something I hadn't felt in years. Boundaries. Not even 15 minutes passed before the phone vibrated with fury. Laura. I didn't answer. Message after message. What did you do? There's no internet. Vincent is in the middle of a meeting. The card doesn't work. I read without responding. I poured myself another coffee, my third that morning, but who's counting? I sat on the bed. I waited. At 10:38 a.m., a different message. From Vincent. Mom, the card didn't work at the supermarket. Laura is very upset. She says you humiliated her. Humiliation. What a convenient word when the money stops flowing. It's not a bank error, I wrote calmly. It's my decision. The house is mine, the bills are mine, and the respect is mine too. The phone vibrated again. Incoming call from Vincent. I answered. Mom, his voice was tense. Laura is crying. She says we have nothing to eat. Vincent? I answered slowly. There is perfectly good food in the refrigerator. I bought it yesterday. What there isn't today is steak or expensive wine. And that's not hunger. That's inconvenience. Silence. But the internet, he started. Laura says it's essential. Essential is respect, I said. And yesterday there was none. I hung up. It didn't take long for the message I hadn't expected. The one that revealed more than Laura intended. She sent it from Vincent's phone, but I knew the tone immediately. The sharp edges. The entitlement. If you think you can control us like this, you're very wrong. This house is also mine. Everything we have belongs to the family. I read it twice. This house is also mine. There it was. The sentence that confirmed what I had always suspected but couldn't prove. Laura didn't just feel entitled. She believed she was the owner. 20 minutes later, the phone rang again, but this time it was the hotel front desk. Mrs. Pembroke, said the receptionist, her voice carefully neutral. There's a couple in the lobby asking for you. They say they're family. My stomach dropped. They had found me. Then I remembered. The phone tracking. Laura had installed it months ago. For safety, she'd said. In case you get lost or something happens. I had thought it was sweet at the time. Considerate even. Now I understood it was just another leash. Tell them I'll be down in 5 minutes, I said. Thank you. I put on my sweater, picked up the black bag out of habit. It went everywhere with me now. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time, straightened my blouse, and took the elevator down. I saw them from across the lobby before they saw me. Laura was pacing back and forth near the entrance, phone in hand, gesturing at nothing. Her heels clicked sharp on the marble floor. Vincent stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground, like a scolded child waiting outside the principal's office. When Laura spotted me coming out of the elevator, she lunged toward me. "This is insanity!" she shouted. Heads turned. A businessman in the lounge lowered his newspaper to watch. "How dare you cut everything off? We have rights." I stopped 3 feet in front of her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step back. I just looked at her the way you look at someone who has already crossed every line there was to cross. "Rights are respected," I said, "when a person recognizes who is who. You turned off the television in my living room. You called me old. You sent me to my room like a punished child. And my son said nothing." I paused. That's where the favors ended. "But we're family," she insisted. Her voice had shifted now, higher, more desperate. "You can't leave us like this." "Family doesn't humiliate," I answered, "and family doesn't take what isn't theirs." Vincent raised his head for the first time. "Mom," he murmured, "are you really going to keep doing this?" I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man my boy had become, at the exhaustion in his eyes, at the guilt he wore like a coat he couldn't take off. "I'm not doing anything, son," I said. "This started when I stopped existing in my own house. I'm just closing the tap." Laura let out a bitter laugh. "You're going to regret this," she said. Her chin was up, but her eyes were wet. "I'm not just some woman you can push around." Something stirred inside me. Not fear, curiosity. "We'll see about that," I answered. "For now, go back to the house. Read the document carefully, and start packing boxes." I turned around and walked back toward the elevator. I didn't wait for a response. Behind me, I heard Laura say something sharp to Vincent, and Vincent say nothing back. The elevator doors closed. I leaned against the wall and let out a long breath. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of standing your ground after years of giving it away. When I got back to the room, I picked up my phone and turned off the location tracking. No more leashes. I sat down at the desk and noticed a notification from my banking app. Transaction declined. Establishment: Select Butchery and Wine. Amount: $127.45. I stared at it. I pictured Laura at the checkout counter, card in hand, line behind her. The cashier's awkward pause. The word on the little screen: declined. I didn't smile, but I didn't feel sorry either. The person who kicks you out of your own living room doesn't deserve to have you pay for the show. And I had just lowered the curtain. I slept little that night. Not from remorse. The mind just doesn't turn off easily when it finally starts connecting pieces that had been loose for years. The next morning, I woke before the alarm with a nagging feeling, like when you know something doesn't add up but can't quite name it. I got up slowly, washed my face with cold water, made coffee, and sat at the desk with the blue folder open in front of me. I went through it page by page the way I used to review files at City Hall. Carefully, methodically. The way that caught that $12,000 error in 1998. That was when I noticed it. Nothing was missing, but there was too much. Between old receipts and copies of the deed, there was an envelope I didn't remember putting there. White paper, logo of First Regional Bank. I opened it. Late payment notice. Personal loan account number 774-2-8891. Borrower, Laura Ann Pembroke. Property address, 847 Maple Street. Amount past due, $2,847.33. I frowned. This wasn't mine. I didn't have a personal loan, never needed one, never wanted one. But why was it in my folder? Then I remembered. 3 weeks ago, Laura had offered to help me organize some paperwork. "Let me do this for you, Mom. You've done so much for us." I'd thought it was kind. I'd given her the folder to file some receipts. She must have mixed this in by accident. Or maybe not by accident at all. I kept reading. Loan originated March 15th, 2023. Original amount, $15,000. Current balance, $12,847.33. Residential address used for credit verification, 847 Maple Street. A cold feeling crept down my spine. She had used my address, my home, to secure a personal loan. I started going through the folder more carefully now, not casually, like an investigator. And I found more. Another envelope, same bank, different account. Credit card account number 445-5782-1993-20012. Account holder, Laura Ann Pembroke. Billing address, 847 Maple Street. Current balance, $8,432.67. Minimum payment, past due, $347. My hands were trembling now, not from fear, from realization. I found a store credit account from Harrington's department store, $2,100 balance. My address. A furniture financing agreement from Comfort Living, $4,500 for a bedroom set, the one she'd insisted on for their room. My address. A separate phone account, $890 past due. My address. Everything using my home as the billing address. Everything using my home as proof of stable residence. Everything accumulating debt tied to a property that wasn't hers. I sat with the papers spread out on the desk like cards of a game that finally reveals its trick. This was why Laura always got to the mailbox before me. This was why she helped with the household paperwork. This was why she had grown so comfortable, so confident, so entitled. She wasn't just a rude daughter-in-law. She was someone who had quietly installed herself as the owner, not just of my space, but of what my space represented. Credit, solvency, a clean address for dirty money. I gathered the papers carefully. My hands were steady now. The shock had passed. What remained was clarity. I picked up my phone and called Daniel. "I need you to review something with me," I said. "Today, as soon as possible." What happened? I found papers, loans and credit accounts in Laura's name, all using my address, going back almost 2 years. Heavy silence on the other end. "Did you sign anything?" His voice had changed. Lawyer mode. "No, never." "Then come to the office, now. This isn't just an eviction anymore, Elaine. This could be something much more serious." An hour later, I was sitting across from Daniel with the documents organized on his mahogany desk. Left to right, chronological, oldest to newest, edges aligned. Daniel put on his reading glasses, thick black frames, and read calmly. Underlined dates with a red pen. Circled amounts. Drew small arrows between documents where the connections became clear. I waited. Patience is something you learn after 35 years of other people's paperwork. After 12 minutes, he took off his glasses. "She's been using your residential address as an implicit guarantee," he said. "Lenders see a stable address, a property owned free and clear for decades, and they extend credit more easily. If she stops paying, which she already has, The trouble lands at your door. Collection agencies, legal notices, possibly liens. Can the house be lost? Not easily, but there are complications, and there's something else. He pointed to a document near the end of the row. Credit extension request, submitted to First Regional Bank on August 22nd, requesting an additional $25,000 line of credit. Rejected. Why rejected? Look at the signature line. I leaned forward. It read Elaine M. Pembroke, but it wasn't mine. The loops were wrong. The P in Pembroke slanted the wrong direction. The E was too tall, too narrow. Anyone who knew my handwriting would see it in a second, but a bank clerk processing hundreds of applications a day might not look twice. Is that forgery? I asked. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. It could be, Daniel said carefully. Or at least an attempt. The bank flagged it. That's why it was rejected. But the attempt is documented, and that changes everything. He closed the folder and looked at me. This isn't a family dispute about a television anymore, Elaine. This is potential fraud, identity misuse, possibly elder financial abuse under state law. Those words hung in the air. Elder financial abuse. I had heard the term at City Hall, processed reports about it. Old women whose children drained their accounts. Old men whose caregivers forged checks. I had filed those cases, stamped them, sent them forward. I never thought I'd be one of them. I left Daniel's office and walked back to the hotel. I needed to feel the ground under my feet, even though my left knee was complaining loudly by the third block. I promised myself I'd soak my feet in a hot bath tonight. On the walk, I thought about Laura, not with hatred, with something closer to sad understanding. Over 4 years, I had learned things about her, small pieces that didn't add up until now. Laura grew up in Ashland, a small town 2 hours east. Her father, from what Vincent once told me after too much wine at Thanksgiving, was a kind man but a gullible one. Lost the family savings twice, once to a bad investment, once to a partner who vanished with the money. By the time Laura was 16, they'd moved 4 times, each house smaller than the last. Her mother, I met her once at the wedding, a thin woman with sharp eyes and a smile that never reached them, raised Laura with one philosophy: nobody gives you anything. You take it or you lose it. Laura took that lesson to heart. She had worked as an accountant at a mid-size firm. Good salary, $67,000 a year. But 2 years ago, the firm let her go. She told Vincent she was exploring opportunities. Told me she was taking time to find the right fit. The truth I now understood was simpler and sadder. She was drowning. The debts had started before the layoff. Credit cards maxed out. A loan to cover the credit cards. A store account to furnish the bedroom she insisted on redecorating. And when the paychecks stopped but the bills didn't, she did what desperate, proud people do. She improvised. My address became her anchor. My name became her safety net. I didn't excuse her. Understanding why someone sets a fire doesn't undo the burn. Laura had options. She could have told Vincent, could have asked me for help, could have found a path that didn't involve forgery and deception. But she chose the path that kept her pride intact while destroying mine. That was the part I couldn't forgive. Not the money, not even the forged signature. The fact that she sat at my table every day, ate my food, used my electricity, and saw not a person, but a resource, a utility, something to be used until it was used up. The weekend passed slowly. I stayed at the hotel, took my meals downstairs. $18 for the senior breakfast special, eggs, toast, fruit, unlimited coffee, and read the newspaper cover to cover the way I used to before Laura moved in and started complaining about the rustling pages. On Monday, I called Dorothy Hayes, my oldest friend from church, and told her I was taking a few days for myself. She didn't ask questions. Good friends know when not to push. On Wednesday evening, my phone rang. Daniel. Elaine, I have the results from the signature analysis. I sat up in the wingback chair. Outside, city lights flickered on against a darkening sky. Tell me, my colleague at the bank pulled the original application, compared it with your signature samples from your City Hall personnel file, which, by the way, they still had in archive. And? Not a match. The letter formation is clearly different. Pen pressure inconsistent with your writing style. Whoever signed that document was attempting to imitate you, but they're right-handed with a different grip angle. Laura is right-handed. So are most people. But combined with the address misuse, the loans, the late payments, it forms a clear, documented pattern. I closed my eyes. There's one more thing, Daniel said. I did some checking on my own. Laura's employment history. What about it? She wasn't just laid off from her accounting firm. A contact of mine there, off the record, told me she was terminated for cause. Discrepancies in client accounts. The firm handled it quietly to avoid publicity. No prosecution. But she didn't leave because of downsizing, Elaine. Silence. She's done this before, I said. It wasn't a question. It appears so. I looked at the blue folder on the desk. My name, my house, my life, and a woman who'd been quietly dismantling all of it, one forged signature at a time. I want the meeting. Friday. Everything on the table. Already scheduled. 10 a.m. I've organized a presentation folder. Copies for everyone. Tabbed, color-coded. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Daniel was as meticulous as I was. That's why I'd called him. One question, Daniel said. Do you want me to bring up her employment history during the meeting? I thought about it. No, I said finally. The forged signature is enough. Keep the rest as insurance. I don't want to destroy her. I want her out of my house and out of my life. Understood. I hung up. The television was on, Channel 7 as always. The weatherman predicted clear skies for the weekend. I picked up the remote and turned the volume up. Just a little, because I could. Friday morning arrived like a held breath finally released. I woke at 6:15 a.m., showered slowly, dressed carefully, a navy blue blouse, pressed and wrinkle-free, gray slacks, my pearl earrings, the ones Harold gave me for our 25th anniversary, simple black flats, no extra jewelry beyond the earrings and my wedding band, which I still wore on my right hand. I wanted to look exactly like who I was. Not powerful, not intimidating, just upright. I arrived at Daniel's office at 9:40 a.m. His receptionist, Kathleen, offered me coffee. Black, no sugar. I sat in the conference room and waited. The table was long, 8 chairs. At my place, Daniel had set a glass of water, a pen, and a notepad. At the center of the table sat 2 identical navy folders, tabbed and color-coded. One for Vincent, one for Laura. Remember, Daniel said, sitting beside me, you don't need to raise your voice. The papers do the talking. I've been quiet for 68 years, I said. I can manage a few more minutes. At 10 o'clock sharp, the door opened. Laura entered first. Of course she did. She was wearing a fitted black dress and heels, hair blown out, makeup flawless. She looked like she was arriving at a business lunch, not a legal reckoning. But I saw the cracks. The way her fingers gripped her handbag too tight. The way her eyes scanned the room, looking for exits. The way she lifted her chin just a little too high, the universal gesture of someone pretending they're not afraid. Vincent came behind her, pale, unshaved, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled button-down shirt, untucked on one side. He looked like he hadn't slept since Monday. When he saw me, something moved across his face. Guilt, sadness, relief, all at once. Good morning, Daniel said. Professional, neutral. Please have a seat. Laura sat across from me without a word, arms crossed. A wall. Vincent sat beside her, hands flat on the table. This is ridiculous, Laura said immediately. We didn't need to come to a lawyer's office. All of this could have been handled at home. I looked at her without blinking. At home, I said, you turned off my television and sent me to my room. Here, we fix what broke at home. Daniel opened his portfolio. Let's be clear about the facts, he said. Mrs. Elaine Pembroke is the sole legal owner of the property at 847 Maple Street. Purchased in 1987. Paid in full by 1997. There is no lease, no rental contract, and no documentation granting occupancy rights to any other party. He placed the deed on the table. The eviction notice served on November 15th is valid under state law, 30 days to vacate. We know all this, Laura snapped. Is that why you dragged us here? No, Daniel said. There are additional matters. He slid the navy folder to the center of the table. Open to the first tab. Vincent reached for it. Laura leaned over. First tab, personal loan statement. Account number 7742-8891. $12,847.33 outstanding. Address 847 Maple Street. Second tab, credit card. Balance $8,432.67. 3 months past due. Same address. Third tab, store credit. Harrington's, $2,100. Fourth tab, furniture financing, $4,500. Fifth tab, phone account, $890 past due. Vincent turned each page like he was handling something radioactive. His face changed with every tab. Confusion, disbelief, horror. Laura sat perfectly still. The color drained from her face. "Laura," Vincent said quietly, not looking up, "you told me there were no debts. You said we were saving." She turned to him, and her composure cracked. "Because if I told you the truth, you wouldn't have done anything," she shouted. "You always hide behind your mother. Every problem. You just run to her like a child." Vincent's jaw tightened. He turned to the sixth tab and stopped. The credit extension request. $25,000. August 22nd. Rejected. And at the bottom, a signature. Elaine M. Pembroke. Not mine. Vincent looked at me, then at Laura, then back at the page. "Laura," he said, and his voice had changed. Lower, harder, a door closing. "Did you forge my mother's signature?" The room went silent. "I didn't forge anything," Laura stammered. It was to consolidate the loans. I thought if I could—" "Which family?" I asked. My voice was steady. "The one built with honesty, or the one that squeezes until there's nothing left?" I opened my mouth to say more, but the words caught in my throat. For a moment, I wasn't a property owner sitting in a lawyer's office. I was just a mother, watching her son's face collapse as he realized who he'd married. The ache of that nearly undid me. I took a breath, found my voice again. Daniel spoke, his tone neutral as a surgeon's. "The signature has been compared with Mrs. Elaine Pembroke's authenticated samples. They don't match. This constitutes attempted forgery. Combined with the address misuse for financial purposes, there are grounds for criminal charges: fraud, identity misuse, potentially elder financial abuse." Laura's hands were shaking. "You can't do this," she whispered. Vincent stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. "Enough," he said, not a shout. Something worse. A declaration. "Enough lying, enough screaming, enough using my mother like she's a bank with no closing time." Laura looked at him, stunned. "You're taking her side?" "I'm taking the side of the truth, and the side of respect, something you forgot a long time ago." Laura turned to me, raw, unfiltered, desperate. "You won," she spat. "That's what you wanted, to separate us." I shook my head slowly. "I didn't win anything," I answered. "I recovered what was mine, my house, my voice, my place." Daniel closed his portfolio. "The recommendation is clear. Comply with the 30-day deadline. Otherwise, criminal charges for forgery and financial abuse remain on the table." Laura clenched her fists. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Tears of fury, not remorse. "We have nowhere to go." I leaned forward. "That is no longer my problem," I said. "I was also afraid when I was widowed. I started over at 56 with nothing but a house and a government pension, but I never stepped on anyone to hold myself up." Vincent closed the folder. He looked at Laura for a long moment. "Laura, let's go home and pack." She stared at him. "What?" "I'm not staying where my mother isn't respected. I'm not staying in a life built on lies." Something broke in her face. Not softened. Broke. "You'll regret this," she told Vincent. Then she pointed at me. "And you're going to end up alone. Old and alone." I looked at her with a calm I didn't know I had in me. "Being alone," I said, "is not the same as being humiliated. And I've already made that comparison." Laura stood, knocked her chair backward, and walked out without looking back. Her heels echoed down the hallway, sharp and fast, growing fainter with each step. Vincent stayed, just for a moment. "Forgive me, Mom," he said in a low voice. "I took too long to wake up." I stood and put my hand on his arm. "The important thing," I told him, is that you did." He nodded, eyes shining. He squeezed my hand, then turned and followed her out. The door closed. I sat back down slowly. Daniel poured me a glass of water. My left knee was aching from sitting so long in the hard chair, but I barely noticed. "You were brave," he said. I shook my head. "I was necessary. There's a difference." They were gone within 3 weeks. Not 30 days. 21. I wasn't there on moving day. Daniel had advised against it. "Don't give them a stage," he said. "Some people only perform when there's an audience." So that morning I went to a small day spa on 5th Avenue. Quiet place. Clean. The kind where silence is respected and nobody asks why you're alone. While a young woman massaged my feet, the left one still aching from all that walking earlier in the week, I thought about my living room, my armchair, the echo of that phrase, "You don't have permission to be here anymore." At 11 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Keys returned. Property vacant. All clear. Richard Callahan." I closed my eyes. I didn't feel victory. I felt rest. I returned home that afternoon. The gate was closed. The white fence stood calm in the late November sun, as if nothing had happened. When I opened the front door, the air was different. Not better yet. Just different. Like when a room has been sealed too long and finally light gets in. There were scuff marks on the hardwood where furniture had been dragged, a crooked nail on the wall where a picture used to hang, a wide open silence, but not the tense kind, the peaceful kind. I walked through every room slowly, touching the walls, the countertops, the windowsills, like someone confirming she was still alive, still here, still the owner of her own life. In the kitchen I found a folded piece of paper on the table. "Mom, forgive me. I had to lose everything to open my eyes. Vincent." I put it in my bag. Not as a trophy, as a seed. That same week, I got to work. I painted the living room a warm peach, Benjamin Moore soft melon, $52 a gallon. 3 coats, just like the Navajo white I'd put up years ago. Except this time I hired a young man from the hardware store to do the high parts, because my knees aren't what they used to be, and neither is my pride. I moved the armchair closer to the window where the morning light hits just right. Changed the curtains. Donated the furniture Laura had picked out. Every piece of it. The house started to look like me again. I turned the TV on when I wanted. Off when I wanted. The remote control stopped being a weapon. It became just an object again. I signed up for water aerobics at the community center, Tuesdays and Thursdays, $45 a month. I called Dorothy Hayes and Maggie Sullivan and all my friends from church and told them the front door was open again. No more screening. No more "she's too tired." The afternoons filled up. Cards on the kitchen table. Coffee brewing. Old stories told again, and this time they didn't sting so much. One Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after the move, I was brewing fresh coffee when I heard a knock at the front door. Short, gentle, respectful. I opened it. Grace stood there, my granddaughter, 14 years old, small backpack on one shoulder, eyes nervous but hopeful. "Grandma," she said softly, "can I come in?" I pulled her into my arms without a word. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need speeches. She sat in the floral armchair, my armchair, and tucked her legs beneath her. Sunlight came through the new peach curtains. The room smelled like fresh paint and coffee. "Mom and Dad are fighting a lot," Grace said quietly. She picked at the strap of her backpack. "I don't know who's right or wrong, but I miss you. I miss this house." I sat on the arm of the chair beside her. "You don't have to choose sides, sweetheart. You just need to know that this door is always open for you." "Always?" "Always." She looked down at her hands. "Mom says you hate us." I took a slow breath, let it out. "I don't hate anyone," I said. "I just refuse to be treated like I don't exist. Those are 2 very different things." She nodded, not fully understanding yet, but feeling safe. And at 14, that's enough. "Can I stay for dinner?" "You can stay as long as you want." Months passed. Grace came every Saturday. Sometimes she brought homework. Sometimes she just curled up on the couch and read. One evening she fell asleep with a book on her chest, and I covered her with the quilt my mother had sewn in 1962, the one with the faded blue stars that I'd never had the heart to throw away. Vincent called once a week. Short conversations, careful ones. like two people relearning how to talk after a long silence. He had moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, was learning to pay his own bills, learning to cook something beyond scrambled eggs. We were rebuilding, slowly, the way you repair a house after a storm, one board at a time, checking each one before you nail it down. Laura was gone from my life. I heard through Vincent that she'd moved to another city, found work again. I hoped she'd find whatever it was she'd been chasing all those years. I didn't fully forgive her, but I stopped carrying her weight. One morning, Maggie Sullivan knocked on my door. She was wringing her hands, eyes full of worry. "Elaine," she whispered, looking over her shoulder like someone might hear. "My son wants me to sign some papers. He says it's a great opportunity to sell the house, but something doesn't feel right." I poured her a cup of coffee. I took out the blue folder, worn soft at the edges now, held together with new rubber bands, and set it on the table. "Sit down, Maggie," I said. "Let's read it together, slowly." That was how something I never planned began. Women started coming to my door, not to ask for permission, to ask for clarity. Dorothy's sister-in-law, whose stepson wanted power of attorney just in case. A widow from the next block whose landlord was raising rent illegally. A retired nurse whose ex-husband's lawyer was pressuring her to sign away part of her pension. I helped them the way I knew how, the way 35 years at City Hall had taught me. Read the document, check the numbers, ask the questions nobody else is asking. I, who for years had made myself small so I wouldn't be in the way, found myself taking up space again. Real space. My space. Today, I'm sitting in the same armchair as always. The house is silent. But it's not an empty silence. It's a silence full of peace, the kind you earn. Outside, birds are singing in the old oak tree in the backyard, the one Harold planted the year we moved in. Inside, everything is in its place. The coffee is hot. The television is off, by choice, not by command. I learned something late in life. Yes, but I learned it in time. Age doesn't take away your power. It takes away your patience to give it away. I pick up the remote control from the side table. Cheap plastic. Light as air. I remember the night at the Grand Central Hotel, holding it on the pillow next to me like it was the most important object in the world. Now it's just a remote. Nothing more, nothing less. I press the button. The screen glows. Channel 7. The evening news. No one walks in to turn it off. No one tells me I don't have permission. The remote is in my hand. And this time, it's exactly where it belongs. If this story touched something inside you, if it reminded you of a door you closed in silence or a word you swallowed for years, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to keep walking this road with me, stories of life, dignity, and quiet justice, subscribe. There are still many stories to tell, and we don't walk this path alone.